There are a few shooter campaigns I tend to come back to. Shadow of Chernobyl, F.E.A.R, the original Quake, Doom 2016, but one of my favourites belongs to 2019's Call of Duty Modern Warfare. It's an aesthetically and mechanically wonderful campaign. It's also extremely bizarre when it comes to its narrative and politics. The game opens with a short pre-rendered cutscene depicting the immediate prelude to a terror attack in Piccadilly Circus. Its main role as a scene is introducing the organisation Al-Qatala. The name sounds deliberately similar to Al-Qaeda, or alternatively the Al-Qassam Brigades. However, Al-Qassam is named after a specific individual, whereas Al-Qatala and Al-Qaeda are both phrases. The Killers has a lot less nuance than the base. While Al-Qaeda was focused on creating a base for jihad against the West, the very first line in this game is Dollar Store Bin Laden telling us that our war is not for our faith. This, I think, is the perfect example of how cowardly the Modern Warfare story is. You can depict Arabs gunning down Brits and use this as the justification for why we get to visit violence bomb people far away from us for the rest of the campaign, but don't you dare have them say Allahu Akbar. It's simultaneously pro-Western interventionism, whitewashing Western actions in the Middle East, while also being too quote-unquote woke and afraid to offend to the plot's detriment. The first mission cuts away from the terror attack to show a raid by the CIA Special Activities Center and US Marine raiders on a Russian depot holding chemical weapons. The targets are justified as mercs, and the player has to spend some time confirming that the base has no Russian military presence. We then call in a white phosphorus airstrike? Contrary to popular belief, white phosphorus usage in itself is not a war crime. It serves as an extremely effective smokescreen for large formations due to its massive spread and high temperature, which shields concealed units from thermal imaging. Incendiary weapons have never been explicitly banned for use against military targets, and this location is about as clean a target as you can get. What strikes me as odd is that the game has you call in the airstrike and that's it. There's no further interrogation of the act within the narrative. It looks visually striking, we put a couple dudes out of their misery, and we move on. It could be said that not drawing attention to it is the point, so as to create unease in the player because nobody questions these actions. But, considering it's a kill streak in the multiplayer, I doubt the devs put that much thought into it. It does make me genuinely laugh that Homefront, the 2011 shooter where North Korea somehow invades America, put more genuine consideration to its usage of white phosphorus in this game. Again, Homefront, the game that somehow has less nuance than Red Dawn. The gameplay of 2019 makes some notable changes from previous games in the franchise. After a string of futuristic CODs, people were needing a reset, not dissimilar to the original Modern Warfare following World War II fatigue. It was marketed as being highly realistic, and some new mechanics reflect that. The player can now mount weapons on different surfaces to provide accurate fire. This wasn't great for the multiplayer due to it encouraging camping, but works well in the single player by placing value on positioning. Running and gunning is still key, but you can hold a spot better by leaning around corners. When encountering nested gun positions, you can lay suppression to silence them momentarily, though this isn't that useful on higher difficulties. If using night vision goggles, the player will cant the weapon and aim with an IR laser instead of aiming down sights. This game also introduced to many the modern white phosphor style of NVGs. Infinity Ward has always been ahead of the curve in this regard. But in essence, it is still a Call of Duty game, and there are a few other notable gameplay changes. Because of the stress being put on its authenticity, I decided to meet the game where it's at and play on realism difficulty. Yeah, this mode kinda sucks. It's got the same gameplay as veteran difficulty but with limited HUD. This means you'll pick up a gun and have no idea if you have 200 rounds on backup or just 2. A better solution would have been using the inspect animation as an ammo checker, which would briefly display your round count. Underbarrel grenade launchers also lack a physical sight, so without the HUD crosshair you'll have to vaguely guess your shots. Presentationally, however, the game is pretty stunning. It came out on Infinity Ward's shiny new engine, and this reflects in its shiny looking guns, surfaces and character models. The motion capture is now at a level directly equivalent to live action in the physical performances of the actors. It isn't solely present for the characters in the cutscenes though, there's consistently detailed animation for all manner of random characters. One of the more influential parts of 2019's style is its weapon animations. They utilise screen shake and slight jiggles to give the weapon a significantly increased weight. Arguably the wrong lessons have been learned from this by the industry, but it absolutely sells the feeling of someone extremely skilled handling these weapons. The sound design as well is top notch.
Secure.
There's a pretty good video which pairs MW19 sounds with COD 4 animations. I think it demonstrates how good the sound work is on the newer title. Animation director Mark Grigsby goes into greater detail in a very entertaining interview with Game Informer. He was previously an animator on COD 4 and also rapped the end credits song.
We ready to war as a guest on board. My tribe of war torn. And this the third installment, Infinity Ward shit. Don't soil your drawers cause it's deep in his hard, bitch.
He went on to work at Respawn on Titanfall before returning to Infinity Ward for MW19, similar to another talented animator. He's now the studio head. That was all tangential, but I think he's a pretty cool guy. He speaks on the balance between realism that the higher-ups are pushing for, and his own inclusions of visual flair and exaggeration. The passion the animators had for their craft is clearly demonstrated in the game. Though, take note of a random thing he says.
You know, we were going for that real tier 1, this person works and sleeps with this weapon non-stop.
Tier 1 is a fairly loose classification, but typically refers to special mission units of the United States military. Namely, Delta Force, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, or SEAL Team 6, the 24 Special Tactics Squadron, the Intelligence Support Activity, and the Army Rangers Regimental Reconnaissance Company. He means the game intends to depict the player characters as the most elite operators possible. In the earliest COD games there were British, American and Soviet campaigns. 2 for conventional grunt work of different styles and 1 for unconventional warfare. Call of Duty 4 carried this forward with an American Marines campaign and a British campaign under the SAS. Then going into MW2 it's now the Army Rangers and the SAS. The gameplay of the Rangers is similar to the Marines, but they are a notably more elite unit. Then by MW3, grunt work has been ditched entirely in favour of a Delta Force/SAS split campaign. Noah Caldwell-Gervais makes a solid point in his COD campaign overview that this is likely because the multiplayer of the games emphasise being the absolute best and reaching high prestige. Therefore, to get you pumped up to play MP, the campaign gives you a taste of what it feels like to be the best of the best. Food for thought. At any rate, the Spec Ops perspective in this game ties into a wider fetishization of the Special Operations community. Films like Zero Dark 30, 13 Hours, 12 Strong, Lone Survivor, Sniper, Special Ops, and American Sniper all contribute to this.
Boss, you killed a child.
Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss.
This is a product of the fact that modern warfare relies on special units being inserted where it isn't operationally or politically viable for full militaries to go. So much of the notable fighting done by Americans since Iraq in 2003 has been done by Special Operations Forces. This brings us to the player character, Alex Keller. Supposedly his name anyway, though the mission intro text implies this is just another identity. He's a member of the CIA Special Activities Center, arguably the most selective of the US Tier 1 units. SAC, or formerly SAD, is needed to perform operations that are typically illegal and highly secret, though it's actually the other player character who does most of the clandestine action. The more politically informed among you may be asking how it's politically feasible for America to flatten a Russian depot then steal their equipment. I might have said operationally feasible too, considering it's not like you can just waltz in, but then again I doubt the Russian Air Defense Forces care that much at this point. Anyway, it's because it takes place in the fictional nation of Kastovia. The name Kastovia is never mentioned in the plot, we'll get on to why later. Turns out Russian military were actually present. Spetsnaz, an important detail. We find the gas and we leave. Yeah, kinda predictable if you played any other COD campaign.
Who the fuck is this?
Good question, Marine.
John,
Haswell,
where are you?
occupied.
I've got a problem.
Russians?
Word travels fast.
No, they're just usually the problem. Captain Price is one of the only characters in this game who directly resembles his COD 4 appearance. He's not even the second iteration of the character though, he's a reboot of a reboot. Price in the original Call of Duty had an accent appropriate to the time, and you got the sense he was fairly well to do. He wasn't opposed to unconventional warfare, but he never really fought dirty. Price in Modern Warfare was brutal and had the necessary lack of scruples to get things done. But he still liked to wax lyrical and go into philosophy, indicating he was well educated. Now Price speaks in a more coarse and to the point manner. He'll still draw up analogies, but they're ones the average modern gamer can more easily understand. If I had to give a reason for this, I think they want to make him seem more working class. The boys on the ground are supposed to be more relatable than the brass, so you understand that only they can make the necessary tough choices, the higher-ups wouldn't get it. Mission 2 introduces us to our other player character, Sergeant Garrick. It's set in London's Piccadilly Circus as we intercept a terror attack, the same we saw in the intro. Garrick feels he has to constantly fight with his hands behind his back, and this mission demonstrates that fact. There's no snipers in place so we don't unduly alarm the public, and we start the mission having to fight rifles and LMGs with sidearms. Note the accent of the guy who tells us this. MW19 is a favourite of mine for the same reason World at War is. World at War broke its campaign to fighting the Germans who fought in a conventional manner and the Japanese who didn't. 2019 does the same move with the Russian military in Al-Qatala. AQ ram cars emerge from everywhere and cause chaos. They're often preoccupied with gunning down civilians, and there's a few opportunities to save people in this level if you get the chance. Suicide bombers are a very major threat. I say bombers plural, but there's not many of them. Infinity Ward knows it can't overuse them without losing their impact, so they only appear twice in the entire game. Suicide bombings as part of scripted events are pretty prevalent, however. The particular incident shown in game is supposed to be an absolute worst case scenario. Bombings are somewhat expected and understood in the culture here thanks to the Troubles and contemporary Islamist attacks. Shootings, however, aren't. Featuring gunmen and in such massive numbers is almost surreal, especially in a recognisable real location. I've been here. There's something to be said about how all the major powers are dignified with real names and real places, while the Middle Eastern state that undergoes the majority of the oppression is entirely fictional. We meet Captain Price properly in this level. It's pretty smart how his entire philosophy is shown in under a minute.
I want to see. Can you help him? I'm trying. Let me see my girl. What's going on? I can't get it. I can't. Help me! Help me! Wait! What are you doing? No!
He's only interested in the greater good. Not a significant deviation from the previous iteration of the character. Garrick is obviously angry that his hands were tied, so Price takes him on board to bring the fight to the enemy. A smarter narrative would have given us every reason to hate Al-Qatala for this, but then would have progressively revealed the circumstances created by the West that led to the group's attack. The AQ attack in St. Petersburg makes sense because we see the Russian barbarity that drove them to do it. The Piccadilly attack isn't explained by the narrative because we never see any brutal behaviour by Westerners that isn't a response to AQ's attack. They can talk all they want about presenting the different perspectives without telling us which is correct, but the game by omission presents AQ as flatly incorrect for attacking London. Anyway, let's pick up the pace. The remainder of the narrative follows the stolen gas, as all parties are interested in locating it. Alex is introduced to sister and brother Farah and Hadia, Farah being the leader of the Urzikstan Liberation Force. The ULF is a US-backed resistance organisation in the fictional nation of Urzikstan. Urzikstan is a pretty weird place. Arabic is the main language, despite the fact that the Stan part of the name would indicate Persian roots. This is because the real inspiration for Urzikstan isn't any of the Stans, but rather Syria. A key difference is that Urzikstan is under direct Russian occupation, whereas in real life Al-Bashar was the ruler who just had Russian military backing. The informative simulator Syrian warfare can further educate you if necessary.
What kind of Arab would I be if I didn't have an RPG buried in my yard?
Syria is where the plot point of the gas originates from. It was in the zeitgeist when the game started development due to Assad's gas attacks. Aesthetically and visually, Urzikstan is Afghanistan. The view of poppy fields extending outwards towards the mountains met with a clear blue sky carved through by Mi-8s is synonymous with the Soviet-Afghan War. The Russian invasion of Urzikstan began in 1999, marking 20 years of occupation in 2019. In our timeline, in 1999, the Second Chechen War began. We'll return to the similarities between the conflicts later. Farah is shrewd enough to understand that the only reason she's being helped now is because the gas was stolen by a non-state actor. It's of little concern to the West that Farah's homeland is gas because it's predictable and doesn't affect them. It only becomes a problem when the gas might end up elsewhere. However, this is really the only moment she displays any kind of skepticism of the West, and by extension it's the game's only moment of doing so. Embedded is the equivalent of Half-Life 2's point insertion, though ironically the Russians here are genuinely worse than the Combine. It's hard to take seriously though, because it's too much fun to see how much you can get away with.
Go!
The AI is pretty dumb once you start operating outside the careful script the game has written for you. Throughout the mission you can see the face of General Barkov plastered everywhere. This seems odd. Barkov, after all, is just another general. It'd be like some Donetsk child waking up to Shoigu's voice every day. It's almost like they're trying to shoehorn the COD trope of a clear individual antagonist into a setting where it doesn't work. After drawing Russian troops away from a key airbase, the next mission is the attack upon it.
No grenades, so we improvise.
Okay, but if you couldn't source a couple of RDGs, how on earth do you get enough C4 for an entire fleet of RC planes? It was actually fairly prescient of COD to depict FPVs back in 2019, though this is the only time they get used. If you were tuned into a lot of the combat in Syria and Iraq against ISIS, you could definitely see how drones were going to start playing a major role. We have yet to see a modern military shooter that actually reflects the realities of modern warfare, which is why I'm excited for Zero Losses, granted it's not a shooter. At a later point in the mission, there's an interesting exchange between a pair of Russians.
Locked.
I wish there was more stuff like this in the game that actually poses interesting ideas about modern warfare, and less generic warfare with the 2019 coat of paint. At the end of the mission, Alex brings in an Apache to wipe out the Russians who have us surrounded. In 2001, CIA SAD operatives arrived in Afghanistan as part of the USA's first act of the war on terror. Working with local fighters, their primary role was bringing in air support, as Alex does here. Laswell says the gunship is unmarked, but does it really matter? They can't see any emblems in these conditions, and if it were to be shot down, they could probably put 2 and 2 together. If we think back to the Battle of Kasham, the US was only willing to annihilate the Wagner Group members there because they weren't regular Russian army, which was confirmed by the Russian Federation. So who exactly are these Russians?
פוטי לא ימות. פוטי ימות בירושלים, הוא נקרא גוג. משיח בן דוד יהרוג אותו ובאותו רגע יקרוא אותו. תגידו אמן!
The following mission, Clean House, is definitely the game's most iconic. It's a night raid on a London townhouse and the game's shortest mission on average. A wonderfully atmospheric mission throughout, beginning with a neighbourhood and progressing to an uncannily realistic home. You engage in slow, methodical violence as you clear each individual room. There was a YouTube short I saw talking about how dark and gritty MW19 is, and I heard him make an interesting comment.
Where we got suicide bombers, and yeah, you can guess what race Activision made them.
You might believe that Al-Qatala is all Arabs, but in this mission there's 2 white terrorists. One man we drop at the start and a woman at the end. This is actually a fitting detail, as there have been fairly numerous cases of jihadist terrorists being white converts. But note that their religious fanaticism was the reason they became terrorists. Officially, Al-Qatala is an anarchist group, which is just another lame cop-out to get away from the fact they're obviously meant to be jihadists. But if they were going to go down this angle, maybe they want to better detail their actual motivations so we can understand why ordinary Brits would give their life for the cause, considering there's no religious motivation whatsoever. No sir, none of that. Nope. The aforementioned white girl was about to blow up the house. If you're watching this, you may well have seen Jacob Geller's video on Modern Warfare 2019, which focuses on destroying the idea that the game isn't political. He also makes the point that any time in the game you do something morally questionable, it's immediately justified afterwards. We dropped the girl, turns out she was going to blow us up. We cleaned the house, turns out they had the wolf's location. Honestly, maybe the best points the game makes about Modern Warfare it makes by accident. In the following mission, Hunting Party, Apache gunships that are flying way too close to the target by the way, unload heavy ordnance into a hospital full of enemies. It's only when we enter that it's revealed there were civilians inside. Of course the game shows the terrorists gunning down civilians, we have to avoid collateral damage. Obvious collateral damage anyway. There was an old man I clipped on a hospital bed, and the game never punished me and my allies never said anything. Later, during the embassy, you can drone strike a civilian car, and Price merely questions if you saw a weapon or not. Then he's happy to move on. He's a little more concerned if you shoot an innocent person in Clean House, but still moves on. You have zero oversight or accountability, and the game might be making something resembling an actual point if it didn't demonstrate our lovable operators always making the right choice. For the crime of being a civilian in the wrong place at the wrong time, you'll be turned into ash and no one will be brought to justice. The Wolf's Den is half a mission based on various tunnel encounters during the War on Terror, but its opening is very similar to Clean House, despite not being talked about as much. I think the only time you're explicitly the bad guy with little benefit is gunning down this mother. She's just protecting herself and her child from armed men breaking in, but the game never lingers on this. Price ends up getting a woman to betray the Wolf's position just by letting her hold a child who was kept from her arbitrarily.
It was the way we had over here of living with ourselves. We'd cut them in half with a machine gun and give them a band-aid. It was a lie. And the more I saw of them, the more I hated lies. Those boys were never going to look at me the same way again. But I felt like I knew 1 or 2 things about Kurtz that weren't in the dossier.
Returning to the course of the main campaign, Alex captures the Wolf, then we lose him in the following mission, the Embassy. This is the longest mission in the campaign and is solely from Garrick's perspective, set in the US Embassy in Urzikstan. Gameplay wise, it's well paced and designed, with a short segment ordering a vulnerable secretary to safety in order to get her keycard. Later in the mission you can save her or fail to, it doesn't have any consequences. I do appreciate that Price's general callousness towards human life isn't exclusively reserved for Arabs. He's an equal opportunity war criminal after all.
Find weapons, barricade the doors.
For the extraction team!
Not yours.
The latter part of the mission centres around defending a single compound from mortar fire and increasing waves of insurgents. It's very obviously based on Benghazi, or at least a view of Benghazi that exists in the popular culture. Following this, the infamous Highway of Death. Not infamous because of its content though, like for example, no Russian. The 338 Lapua anti-material rifle is powerful enough to damage and stop enemy vehicles, including APCs. The game exaggerates the effect of the wind on the bullets, as at this range it would be negligible. You start by engaging Al-Qatala, who send a large variety of equipment. Technicals, mortars, snipers, suicide trucks and lots of infantry. Then the Russians arrive and clean up the remaining AQ.
Russian mix!
They're Su-25s actually, though I don't blame them for the mistake considering how fast they're going. The Russians send APCs and conceal their advance with smoke. It highlights the gameplay differences between the two factions and it's generally a great mission. Rather, the mission gained its reputation for its name. In 1991, during the Gulf War, the Iraqi army was retreating from Kuwait along Highway 80, and it was here they were boxed in and annihilated by coalition aircraft. Now, I personally hold little sympathy for the retreating Iraqi forces, and under the Geneva Convention they weren't expressing an intent to surrender and were valid targets. There were, however, large numbers of civilians amongst the fleeing Iraqis. As far as questionable US actions go during the Gulf War, this is pretty minor despite its reputation. Still, MW19 reframes the Highway of Death as a Russian war crime. Fictional because Urzikstan is, but still. Remember, MW19 sold over 40 million copies. That means millions of people are going to associate the phrase Highway of Death with the COD mission, not the real life event. See, this is why I don't like modern gaming, too much propaganda. Luckily I still have the apolitical masterpieces Squad 22 ZOV and First Son Al-Aqsa, the Knights of the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Is that the fact? Yeah, we are a Hamas warrior. Okay.
Yeah, Hamas, yeah. The road itself is much smaller than an actual highway, and it's primarily littered with civilian vehicles. There's a few tanks, maybe T-55 AM2s, and fictional APCs, which does tell us that Urzikstan had a military prior to the 1999 Russian invasion. I don't think the vehicles in this game are worth analysing. While the US equipment is generally okay with a few oddities, all of Barkov's men use fictional AFVs and US choppers. The devs made Mi-8 models, so I don't know why they used Blackhawks in the final level. Anyway, Urzikstan is a pretty weird country like I said earlier. It's on the Black Sea coast in a fictional peninsula, presumably to avoid having it roll over into real country borders, though Kastovia must occupy some real-life territory based on where it's said to be. Urzikstan's supposed location isn't far from Georgia and Chechnya, both of which have physical geography that matches the Caucasus. Kastovia does indeed look like it fits the region, but Urzikstan doesn't. Someone pointed out that if they put the nation in a similar spot on the Caspian, the geography would make sense. But I do think this positioning is deliberate considering the parallels to Chechnya. Convenient then that the next mission brings us back to the time of the invasion. It's revealed that it was Hadir who stole the Russian gas, which he uses to kill the Russians overrunning our position. In the gas-filled delirium there's a flashback to 1999. While I half criticised the game earlier for having us be Tier 1 certified high-speed, low-drag operators, I will give it credit for dedicating 20 minutes to being a near-powerless little girl. It doesn't tie into any tactical fantasies, and the presence of this mission is solely for the betterment of the story. It starts with us being recovered from a destroyed building, running from Russian gas attacks, hiding from a Russian soldier who killed our father, and finally making a dash for freedom. Yeah, I think it's hard to argue that the brutal depiction of the Russians in this game isn't excessive. I think the devs understood this as well. They wanted a comically evil faction for the sake of shock value, but couldn't have a supervillain yet as they were still trying to be grounded. And they couldn't do ultra-nationalist, i.e. the bad Russians, again. The solution was complete non-committal either to the idea of this being the Russian army under orders from Moscow or a rogue force. These are Barkov's forces. Jacob Minkoff once worked at Naughty Dog and worked on this game as single-player design director. You can feel bits of Naughty Dog influence in this game, like in this scene where if you kill a Russian soldier, the other will call his name out, preceding its implementation in The Last of Us Part 2. Minkoff compares Barkov to Colonel Kurtz, which makes me feel genuine rage. Kurtz is a fascinating character from an incredible film. He was a very promising officer being groomed into the top ranks, but instead elected to join Special Forces a ways into his career. While deployed in Vietnam, he saw things that made him get off the metaphorical boat. He realised the enemy had an enormously larger will to fight and wrote his recommendations to the Pentagon. After seeing no change in course, he went off-grid to fight the war his way. Apocalypse Now has a lot of themes you can read into. I guess my interpretation at the end was that Kurtz was a Jesus-like sacrifice for the sins of all the US occupiers. That way the government could shoulder all the blame on another bad apple. If you're wondering why I've spent so long talking about Kurtz, it's because if I was going to do the same for Barkov it would take about 10 seconds. I will actually. Barkov thinks Urzikstan is a breeding ground for terrorists, so he uses as much firepower on them as possible to force them into submission. That's all you need to know. Comparing him to Kurtz is just laughable. I would have guessed he chose to invade Urzikstan of his own accord, but he was only a lieutenant back then. Also, does the writing team think annexation is like a light term that sidesteps the reality of an invasion? It's literally the term for forcibly occupying territory. Something like special military operation, on the other hand, is an example of careful naming. He won favour with his superiors by capturing villages in coordinated assaults, but his use of chemical weapons was unauthorised. The game seems to distinctly mark use of chemical weapons as overstepping the line. Hadir employs them and becomes our enemy for the remainder of the narrative. Barkov is our enemy specifically because of the gas. This here is really good. The narrative director says he's a general who has the correct intentions but has gone off the rails in his effort to get what he wants. So Barkov's intent to protect Russia by invading Kazakhstan is justified, it's just his means of doing it that are problematic. Because, after all, if launching invasions on states supposedly involved with terrorism was wrong, you'd be saying the entire war on terror wasn't justified by extension. Anyway, Barkov is sanctioned by Moscow but also not. According to the devs, we work with Russians to take him out. Actually, not Russians, but a Russian, singular. The other guy is Ukrainian and sells bootleg cigarettes. Great representation there, Activision. Despite the devs' attempts to avoid painting Russia on the whole as a villain, it was still banned for sale in Russia and heavily criticised for Russophobia. I suppose the frustrating part is that in 1999 Russia invaded in real life. This was the Second Chechen War. It's incredibly cowardly to try and argue the Russian government carries no blame when there were numerous war crimes committed by Russian forces during that conflict, similar to what's seen at the very start of Hometown. The gas is a wholly unnecessary addition just to make them seem more evil. This of course only works if you're putting the Westerners under equal scrutiny, which this game certainly doesn't.
So you are the little devils that killed my soldiers. Отлично.
I have no idea why he says this like he's going to use it for something, as all he does is put us in prison. My only game theory is that this is a holdover from some cut content implying a Russian commander was a paedophile. The Wolf's Den is a fun mission, having us chase Hadir, who is now operating with Alcatala. The latter half of the mission has us clear through tunnels in search of Poundland bin Laden. I will admit, hearing his voice echo through the tunnels of the remnants of the old mine burn is a very cool moment. Like most people in this game, he has a suicide vest.
Cut the wire exactly when I say, not before. Green wire. In 3, 2, 1. Shit!
The Wolf is down, but no hit on Hadir. There's a fallout between Command and our lovable operators on the ground. This is what I was speaking about earlier. Our player characters are supposed to be relatable and the higher-ups aren't. The ULF is reclassified as a foreign terror organisation thanks to Hadir's antics, so Alex goes rogue and leaves for Kazakhstan with them. This would be cool if it had any impact on the narrative whatsoever, like maybe being forced to fight against US forces as Alex. But this plot thread may as well not exist. Between this and the other moments where we carry out dirty work that gets results, a certain message is pushed. That being that special forces need less oversight and more freedom to be creative. It's the same message as Lone Survivor, the book, which posits that soldiers shouldn't be afraid to kill the enemy because of the liberal media back home. It does feel like a relic of a different period, back when the war on terror was still held by the American right to be a justified crusade. And not a giant waste of time and blood at the behest of a certain state in the Levant with no ties to the land it occupies. We get another flashback to F.E.A.R, this time imprisoned in 2009. She would have been 17 at this point, so technically we play as a child soldier again.
There you go.
Yeah, go ahead man, make the torture sequence a minigame, I don't care at this point.
Nice shot!
I think the relatively limited choices offered in Hometown work well to still retain some gravitas. Here the situation doesn't feel as serious since there's a load of options to troll Barkov. The prison break is definitely one of the more memorable parts of the game for me, simply because it's one of the only times I felt the music kick in. If you listen to BO1's Vorkuta, it feels prideful, like you're breaking free of your chains. Here it just feels confusing and desperate, you're outgunned and on the clock. Sarah Schachner did a fantastic job on the soundtrack to this game, though I find the default mixing combined with all the gunfire means it's pretty hard to hear. Piccadilly is a great composite of the older COD's triumphant music with the reality of a terror attack. Too bad you can barely hear it in mission then. F.E.A.R is rescued by a young Lieutenant Price, which explains their prior relationship. Garrick and Price, now in the present, go to St. Petersburg.
Was the capital before Moscow?
The good old days.
Hadir is a Western asset, so if he's caught launching a terror attack in Russia, he could risk a war. Hence why we're here to stop the attack. The Butcher is our target, who'll know where the gas is. I've not mentioned him prior, but he's probably the most interesting antagonist in the game. He's incredibly brutal, as Garrick saw in the embassy.
Now, give us the war! Mercy is weak.
Yet, despite it all, he still wears a football jersey. A little reminder there's still a man in there, turned into this monster by the Russian occupation. After a surprisingly fun chase sequence, we bring him in. To get the Butcher to give up the gas's location, Price uses his wife and child as leverage.
Listen to me, listen to me! Karitka Theater. No, I am not, I swear to you, I'm not! The gas is there, Karitka Theater, I swear to you!
This is definitely the dumbest plot point in the game. Our only way of knowing this is the correct location is him going, "Oh yeah, trust me bro." Sure, we've got his wife and kid, but it's still no guarantee the information is correct. We're able to kill him afterwards too, like, why are we so certain he isn't lying? The performance here by Nick E. Terabe is surprisingly real, however. It's probably the best in the game.
Hey, no!
Please, we are not involved with any of this, I assure you. Papa, make it stop.
It's okay, Papa's here. It's okay. No one's going to hurt you.
What the hell?
The overall mood here is claustrophobic and sickening, and even Garrick is starting to raise questions.
Where do we draw the line, sir?
You draw the line wherever you need it, Sergeant. At the end of the day, someone has to make the enemy scared of the dark. We get dirty, and the world stays clean. That's the mission.
Going Dark is, in my opinion, the best mission in the game. It takes place in Barkov's mansion in Moldova, where we need to find Hadir. You've got complete freedom to approach the objectives how you see fit and take them in any order. It's also the only mission that utilises night vision as an actual mechanic rather than just a cool filter. You need to stay in the dark and clear out lights to come out on top. There's optional targets too, like a technical. It's simply a far better version of the open combat missions the more recent Call of Duty seems to be obsessed with. It doesn't deserve the 451 reference though. You ain't an immersive sim just because you can turn off lights, pipe down bro. It's another mission that contrasts the difference between AQ and the Russian army, primarily in firepower. Hadir, after a bit of enhanced interrogation, was able to find the location of Barkov's gas factory. I don't really get why the game is so hard on Hadir. He's essentially doing the exact same thing we just did to get the location of the gas from AQ, but by taking out the source of the gas he's permanently rectifying the problem. Use of chemical weapons is bad because of the potential damage to civilians from it dispersing and destroying food sources. But by intercepting the gas shipment at the start, he was preventing it from being used on his own people. In Highway of Death we were imminently going to be overrun. It was a last ditch effort in an area completely vacated by civilians. Would have been nice if he gave us a gas mask earlier though. His only real sin is working with Alcatala who target innocent civilians. AQ were themselves Western funded at one point, which is only revealed on a death screen. This does track considering real life.
I'll explain it in a way that you can understand.
Anyway, we have to hand over Hadir to the Russians as a peace offering, but we're still using his info to attack the gas factory. We get F.E.A.R and Alex on board by pointing out that we can go in on a technicality.
A militia with no ties to the West could carry out this mission.
And I don't blame the terrorists, wouldn't I?
When did they get the chance to take this photo? Okay, I will say this part of the mission intro is super cool.
Troops in the open outside the bridge. Call for fire.
The game leans into a style I'd call the surveillance state aesthetic. Instead of shiny animations and walls of info, the briefings are clear and concise. Think file attachments and photos instead of 3D gaming intros. I'd liken it to Watch Dogs or Mr. Robot.
Shit! RIPC's down!
But aren't we supposed to be a militia with no ties to the West? How are we going to explain the Bradley and drone? I have to assume Barkov is wholly rogue at this point, considering how comfortable he is crossing borders with his men. I think the gas factory is supposed to be in the Russian-occupied part of Georgia, though him dropping men into Moldova to protect his dacha is definitely pushing it. I think the only explanation is that Moscow really wants to get rid of Barkov in his war, but can't do it publicly. Hence why they're unbothered by the gunship earlier and the attack here. Though our raid at the start caused the Russians to suspend all deconfliction channels. Maybe that was just grandstanding. But maybe it's a leftover from how Custodio is supposed to be Russia proper. In MW3 they treat the two almost interchangeably. The push through the facility features lots of exotic weaponry and tough enemies. There's a boss fight here against a Juggernaut with a PKM, which is actually pretty challenging and fun. though in the fighting the detonator to blow the charges is broken. F.E.A.R decides to go in and do it manually, but Alex chooses to take her place.
I've been an assignment my whole life. This is what I believe in.
Garrick and Price fight up towards the pipeline, and this here is a great exchange.
No ROEs now, Captain? None at all. Stolen with that sniper.
Garrick has been mostly limited in terms of his firepower throughout the campaign, so him getting to use an M32 and a minigun is cathartic. It helps this is the only time the score feels truly triumphant. This moment would have hit harder if we actually committed some wrong acts in the campaign and now finally had a clear enemy. It would be a kind of penance. Anyway, F.E.A.R finally gets to kill Barkov. Random detail, but I do like how he wears digital camo here unlike his first appearance in F.E.A.R. He also wears a Tel Nashka, so he was probably in the VDV. Barkov's forces being a VDV division makes sense as well with the amount of aviation assets and Spetsnaz they have at their disposal. I don't know how Nikolai stole the chopper, but whatever man, I don't care at this point. That was Modern Warfare. While the gameplay and visuals are super tight, the story really ties itself in knots to avoid being meaningfully about anything, other than the operators are flawless saints who commit no wrong. There's a post-credits scene teasing the rest of the new Modern Warfare trilogy. These games also kinda suck. They remove the generally grounded vibe of 2019 yet aren't as spectacular as the original Modern Warfare, so you get the worst of both worlds. There's zero point covering these as half the storytelling is done via Warzone and the multiplayer seasons. To sum things up, Alex wasn't in that furnace, Graves wasn't in that tank, and Slope wasn't in that head. MW3 doesn't even have good gameplay, though I appreciate the story being one giant Bane post featuring characters like Bravo Nolan, Smee, My Man, Dr. Parvalier, Budden Lee, and Juan of You.
At least you can talk! Who are you? It doesn't matter.
I had planned to go into greater detail on how the story could be improved and how it compares to COD 4, but I'll keep to a shortish summary. Al-Qatala should have been a distinctly Islamist organisation, and we should have seen some evidence of immoral Western actions predating the attack at the start of the game. Otherwise it just seems stupid. The correct theatre attack should have been a feint and the attack should have gone ahead anyway elsewhere, to demonstrate that just getting dirty doesn't guarantee success. Next, the Russians shouldn't have been comically evil. Depicting them killing civilians is fine, accurate even, but don't do it in a dishonest way. Either commit to Barkov being under Moscow's orders or have him be very clearly a rogue actor. I'd prefer the latter. Especially if they went into his new king psyche. Alex works directly with F.E.A.R who's opposed to Barkov, whereas Kyle and Price are primarily after AQ, more specifically the Butcher. If Alex was to truly lead the CIA and go rogue, he'd work as a direct foil to Barkov. Both people who recognised the constraints of the system they operated in, but only one did the correct moral thing. Instead of becoming a new king, he might humble himself to become a simple militia fighter. I guess the thing with Modern Warfare is that a lot of people walked away thinking this was a genuinely morally complex story. Even if all it does is explain continued involvement in the war on terror and justify use of extreme extrajudicial measures to get results. Take a second to ask yourself, what exactly did we, the people of the Middle East, gain from the war on terror? Who was it then that did gain something? Feel free to enjoy entertainment products, this is certainly an entertaining game, but do keep the real messages they push in mind. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the song.
In the zone to be, from a yin to my yang to my yang to Z. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me, cause I'll win, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forged in a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me whole. I feed on the fear of the devil inside of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a warrior, this is my song. I am a warrior and this is my song. another one stands, I'll kill some more. Bullet in the breach and a fire in me, like a cigarette thrown to gasoline. If death don't bring you fear, I swear you'll fear these marching feet. Come to the nightmare, come to me. Deep down in the dark where the devil be. In the mall where the jaws and the razor teeth, where the brimstone burns and the angel weeps. Crawl to the gods if I cross your path, and my silhouette hangs like a body bag. Hope is a moment now long past. The shadow of death is the one I cast. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a warrior and this is my song. My eyes are steel and my gaze is long. I am a warrior and this is my song.
We're not just going to shoot the bastard. We're going to cut out their living guts and use them to grease the treads of our tanks.